Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we are recording a fan fiction. This one is not written by me, so I'm probably going to be a little bit more descriptive about the beginning and the rating and the archive warning and all of that good stuff. And I will probably do this one in 4 pieces. The chapters are a little longer on this one, and I'll make sure for this Podfic series that the beginning of each piece, I will let you know, like a recap. This is the title, this is the author, and this is piece number, whatever. All right, so here we are getting into it. We are reading Freshly Ground Coffee. The author for this one is arxaris. The rating is teen and up. There are no archive warnings. It is a My Hero Academia fandom fan fiction. In the category, the relationship is Bakugo and Kirishima. The characters in this fic are Bakugo Katsuki, Kirishima Eijiro, Midoriya Izuku, and Ashido Mina. The additional tags are aged up characters, POV Bakugo Katsuki, alternate universe coffee shop / cafe, pro hero Bakugo Katsuki, barista Kirishima Eijiro, light angst, background relationships, Miritama, fluff and angst, jealous Bakugo Katsuki, slow burn, Bakugo Katsuki is bad at feelings, Bakugo Katsuki swears a lot, future fic, mutual pining, pining Bakugo Katsuki, happy ending, Bakugo Katsuki needs a hug, insecure Kirishima Eijiro, secret identity, friends to lovers. All right, the words on this one is a little over 19,000. Like I said, it has 4 chapters and they're a little longer, so they're going to be single chapters. All right, here's the summary. Bakugo has been going to BeansPot Coffee for a long time. A hole-in-the-wall coffee shop in the middle of the city. The place was a wonderfully well-kept secret, and that was exactly how he liked it, which was why he instantly was on guard when he walked in one morning to see a new face standing behind the counter. Well, actually, he first saw his hair, stop sign red and pulled up into spikes. Between that and the way too wide smile that stretched across his face, he was almost hard to look at directly, too goddamn bright for this early in the morning. Or, Pro Hero Ground Zero had a morning routine that he liked perfectly fine, thank you very much. That is, until a bright-eyed new barista showed up to throw a wrench in it, one caramel latte at a time. Again, this is Freshly Ground Coffee by arxaris, Chapter 1. Bakugo had been going to BeansPot Coffee for a long time. A hole-in-the-wall coffee shop in the middle of the city, the place was a wonderfully well-kept secret, at least in Bakugo's opinion. For a shop with what he considered the best coffee around, there were usually relatively few customers, and for that, he was endlessly grateful. Bakugo supposed it probably had something to do with the lack of atmosphere. There were only 3 tables scattered around the plain room, and the lighting was honestly garbage. On top of that, the shop didn't have Wi-Fi connection or outlets to charge devices, so it wasn't an ideal workspace for students or business people. There was nothing really aesthetic about it either. No latte art, no cutesy menus, not even any uniforms for the employees. Hell, they'd even spelled the English word coffee wrong on the sign out front. BeansPot Coffee was nothing fancy. Simply a couple of baristas and occasionally the owner of the place slapping aprons over their casual clothes to make the best damn cup of coffee Bakugo ever tasted. The baristas seemed friendly enough with a few other regulars, but luckily they had long since taken the hint that Bakugo didn't want to chat. Even though he'd gone there almost every morning for 2 years, it was near his work and Bakugo was a creature of habit, so he had never had a conversation with any of them beyond his order, and that's exactly how he liked it. Hardly any people, little interaction with the employees, poor lighting, all of it added up nicely to nobody realizing that the guy in the cap, allergy mask, and unassuming tortoiseshell glasses was actually pro hero ground zero. Coffee with a side of quiet, blissful anonymity had become his favorite way to start the workday, which is exactly why he instantly was on guard when he walked in one morning to see a new face standing behind the counter. Well, actually, first he saw his hair. Stop sign red and styled into spikes, it looked ridiculous against the cream-colored walls of the shop. Between that and the way too wide smile that stretched across his face, he was almost hard to look at directly. Too goddamn bright this early in the morning. Bakugo's stomach dropped when his head turned at the sound of the ringing bell, and that smile was suddenly directed at him. Oh my god, please don't try to have a conversation with me. For the love of fucking God, he thought, annoyed. Shitty hair looked like a talker. Bakugo grimaced as he stopped in front of the register. Hey man, what can I get you? Have you ever been here before? I can make a recommendation if it's your first time here. Shitty hair said excitedly, smile looking completely genuine and never faltering. Gross. As he opened his mouth to tell the guy to fuck off and take his order, the back door swung open to reveal one of the usual baristas tying her apron behind her back. She had pink hair cut into a pixie and always wore a lot of eye makeup and flashy clothing. Bakugo had no idea what her name was. That's Takahashi-san. He wants a cappuccino. He doesn't want to talk to you, she said bluntly to the redhead. But in that moment, Bakugo, or Takahashi, his coffee shop identity, decided he liked her. As she busied making his drink, she continued, He's a regular, just let him pay, Kiri. Shitty hair. What kind of name was Kiri? Turned back to the register. His 1,000-watt smile was already back in place. Okay, Takahashi-san, that will be 300 yen, he said cheerfully. A cappuccino is such a manly drink, bro, he added. Bakugo paused as he reached for his wallet, eyes narrowing. What did that even mean? Are you making fun of me, shitty hair? He growled. What? No, I'm serious. I'm still training. I haven't really got the hang of any espresso drinks yet, but I'll get there, the barista said, sounding determined as he hit his knuckles together. It looked painful. What a fucking weirdo. Also, shitty hair? He added belatedly. Bakugo snorted and handed over his payment. You heard me. Not cool, man. My hair looks awesome, he said, patting his spikes defensively with one hand while accepting Bakugo's money with the other. Thankfully, Bakugo was saved from having to reply by Pinky placing the mug down on the counter in front of him. With a small nod, he took the cup and sat at the table furthest from the register, hoping to forget the entirety of this interaction with the redhead barista. Kiri. Unfortunately, that was pretty fucking difficult when the guy was constantly talking and laughing with Pinky as she showed him how to make drinks, or worse, chatting up the other customers who came in to grab their takeout coffees. Bakugo finally finished his cappuccino, a perfectly normal fucking drink, thank you very much, and made his way to the exit, ready to get out of there. Bye, Takahashi-san, he heard Shitty Hair say. See you next time. Bakugo bristled as he opened the door. He flipped off the barista over his shoulder. As the glass door swung shut, he caught the redhead's astonished, "Hey!" before he turned in the direction of his work building and walked away. What a fucking idiot. Time passes. The next morning found Bakugo walking determinedly up to the street to BeansPot Coffee, just as he did every day. He had briefly considered skipping his morning coffee to avoid the chatty redhead from the day before, but he would be damned if he threw a wrench in his routine over a fucking extra. No fucking way. He stopped in front of the door when he reached it, steeling himself for a single moment before roughly pushing it open. Just in luck, his eyes immediately landed on a red spiked monstrosity of a hairstyle. A second later, that ridiculous smile was widening in recognition. Hey, Takahashi-san, Kiri said brightly. I'm guessing you'll have a cappuccino again today, huh? Bakugo grunted, face-eating slightly at the fact that the barista had already memorized his completely normal order. He shoved a few 100-yen coins at Kiri and moved immediately to the side to wait without grabbing his receipt. Kiri raised a brow. You can go have a seat, man, he chirped. I'll bring your drink over when it's done. Bakugo found himself wanting to protest, but he couldn't really think of a valid reason. Whatever, he grumbled, shuffling off to his usual table. He pulled out a paperback and started reading as he waited. However, it was a little hard to focus when he could see Shitty Hair out of the corner of his eye, painstakingly preparing his drink step by slow step while Pinky watched over him, giving him tips and advice and making him laugh. Bakugo didn't realize he was staring until Kiri bumped his and Pinky's hips together playfully, and Bakugo blushed, feeling as if he'd intruded on a private moment. He then returned to his book, refusing to look up again even after he heard footsteps approaching. A steaming mug on a saucer entered his peripheral vision as it was placed on the table in front of him. "Here you go," said the redhead cheerily. Bakugo grunted his acknowledgement and went back to reading. He didn't realize Kiri hadn't walked away until he was interrupted by a soft cough. He jumped slightly and then looked up with a brow raised in annoyance. "What?" Kiri grinned, unfazed. "That's the first espresso drink I've served. Mind telling me if it's all right? If not, I'll have Mina make you another one." Bakugo narrowed his eyes. "This better not fucking suck," he grumbled. But Kiri only laughed. "Just try it. Have some faith, man." Bakugo hoped his expression conveyed how little faith he had in Shitty Hair's coffee-making skills as he raised the mug to his lips. He took a tiny sip, testing the temperature. Once he deemed it drinkable, he took a longer gulp, his eyebrows raised infinitesimally. It didn't suck. In fact, it might be better than Pinky's. Bakugo pretended to take some time to think his answer over before mumbling out, "It's fine." His lukewarm response absolutely did not warrant that bright-ass smile that spread across the barista's face. "It's good?" he exclaimed, seemingly disbelieving. Bakugo narrowed his eyes again. "Think I'm a fucking liar, Shitty Hair?" he snapped. Then guiltily, he added quietly, "Guess you're a natural or some shit. Can't tell you're new." Kiri's smile was absolutely fucking blinding now. "Aw, thanks, man. You're gonna make me blush," he said as Bakugo averted his gaze, unsure what to say. He hoped Kiri would take the hint and leave, but it seemed he would have no such luck, because he started talking again. "Also," he said with a new teasing lilt in his voice, "I wasn't calling you a liar. I just had to make sure you weren't trying to flirt with me." Bakugo choked. Kiri slapped his back as he coughed, barely managing to swallow his sip of coffee without spewing it. He finally regained control of himself and glared up at Shitty Hair through his watery eyes. His eyes were wide. "I was only joking, dude," he said quickly, raising his hands. "Don't you have a job to be doing?" Bakugo hissed. Shitty Hair glanced at the register. "Yeah, probably," he said. "I'll catch you later. Didn't mean to almost kill you. My bad, dude." Bakugo glared at him again, cheeks darkening. Kiri shot him a grin. "For real, though, sorry if I embarrassed you. I swear, I'm only teasing." Bakugo ran a hand down the half of his face that wasn't covered by his glasses. "It's fucking fine. Jeez." Kirishima opened his mouth again, but at that moment, the news channel on the small TV in the corner switched to a story about Ground Zero and the villain duo he'd taken on single-handedly a few nights ago. Bakugo pushed the glasses further up his nose and glanced at Kiri, who had stopped mid-word to stare at the screen. For a split second, Bakugo was worried the look he saw on his face was recognition, but it wasn't quite that. It was almost like his cheeks darkened further as he finally placed the emotion. Adoration. Bakugo coughed lightly to get Kiri's attention, bordering on desperate now for him to return to the register before he spontaneously combusted. "Oh, sorry," he said, his own cheeks darkening now. "Got distracted. You could say I'm a bit of a Ground Zero fan," he finished with a laugh. Bakugo grunted, a non-committal. "He's all right." "Nah, he's amazing," Kiri said, eyes sparkling now. Bakugo slapped a hand to the table. "Shitty Hair, job, now." Kiri laughed. "Enjoy your cappuccino, Takahashi-san," he said lightly as he walked away, like he hadn't just personally embarrassed Bakugo within an inch of his life. Bakugo downed his drink and bolted, trying and failing to tune out Shitty Hair talking to Pinky, saying shit like, "How hot does Ground Zero look in this footage, though? Oh my god." By the time he made it to the safety of his office, he was red all over, and he was pretty sure it had nothing to do with the heat of his drink. Time passes. The next day was his day off, but Bakugo went in for coffee anyway. He'd had a hell of a fight with some villains trying to rob a bank yesterday, and he was worse for the wear from it, sporting cuts and bruises and a shiner under his glasses. He needed some fucking caffeine. Kiri greeted him with a surprised smile and a rough night, Takahashi-san? Bakugo grunted. Something like that, yeah, he said. The redhead looked like he was about to ask Bakugo what happened, so he hurriedly deflected the attention from himself. You, he blurted. It didn't quite come out as a question, and Kiri raised a brow at him. Me? Bakugo grimaced. How was your Friday night, Shitty Hair? He clarified. Kiri looked surprised for a second, but he recovered quickly. He brought a hand up to his neck, and he gave a sheepish smile. I went on one of those classically horrible first dates, to be honest, Kiri said, and then it was Bakugo's turn to raise a brow. Guy just talked about himself the whole damn time. I couldn't get a word in edgewise. It was honestly a relief to go home to my cats at the end of the night. Bakugo made what he hoped was a passing, slightly sympathetic face as he took in the information he'd just been handed. Shitty Hair was gay, and he had cats. Huh. That was mildly interesting, he supposed. Sounds shitty, he mumbled as he paid for his drink. Kiri laughed and turned to the espresso machine to start the order. Yeah, no second date coming out of that one, that's for sure. Bakugo hummed, and Kiri chuckled again. It's fine, he said, pouring steamed milk into his drink. Then he winked at Bakugo. I'm already engaged anyway. Bakugo's brows shot nearly off his forehead. What the fuck? He asked roughly. Was he one of those people who got off on making their partner jealous or some shit? Kiri was laughing in earnest now as he set Bakugo's mug down on the counter between them. Yeah, Ground Zero and I are definitely getting married. He just doesn't quite know it yet. Bakugo's jaw dropped. He attempted for a few seconds to form a response, but ended up just sputtering. Kiri grinned mischievously, and Bakugo rolled his eyes in defeat. Get back to work, Shitty Hair, he mumbled as he took his mug and turned away. It's Kirishima, just so you know, he heard Kiri chime from behind the register. He didn't respond, and Kirishima left him in peace while he drank his coffee. There was a small line forming when he left, feeling considerably better after his caffeine, but Kirishima still made sure to shout a quick, "Have a good one, Takahashi-san," at him as he walked out the door. Time passes. The next morning brought with it the first chills of autumn, and Bakugo was bundled accordingly in a winter coat and a thick scarf. He could feel Kirishima's teasing eyes on him as he removed the layers at the door, but he ignored him. I think a simple sweatshirt would have been the trick, man, Kirishima said playfully as Bakugo finally approached the register. Shut up, Bakugo snapped. I fucking hate the cold. Kirishima giggled, seeming unfazed by his attitude. Bakugo fished out 300 yen and tossed it across the counter to him. Hey, Takahashi-san, Kiri started without picking up the money. I've been working on my caramel latte all week. Think I could convince you to try one of those today instead? Bakugo blinked at him. I always get a cappuccino, he said flatly. I'm not hearing a no, though, Kiri sing-songed. He spread his arms out dramatically, following the arc of a rainbow shape. Come on, man. It's a new season, time to branch out, try new things, make waves. Give your cute local barista your feedback on his latte skills. Bakugo raised an unimpressed brow, shaking his head as he huffed a chuckle. Fine. What the fuck ever. Give me your damned latte, he groaned. Then with a smirk he added, and let me know when you find this cute local barista, and I'll give him my feedback. Hey, Kiri exclaimed, but Bakugo was already walking away to his table, laughing loudly. He took out his paperback to read while he waited, not looking up until there was a mug in front of his face and a familiar scent of sweet caramel was filling his nose. Here you go, Kiri said cheerfully. Bakugo blinked down at the mug, taking in the pattern carefully crafted on top of his latte in milk, caramel, and a bit of chocolate sauce. It looked a lot like shitty hair, he said slowly. Is this another weird ground zero thing? He narrowed his eyes up at Kirishima, who was positively beaming now. Yeah, he said, excited. Looks just like the explosions on his merch, right? Bakugo raised his brows, groaning. You're such a fucking fanboy, he accused. Kiri gasped in mock offense. I'm just practicing, he defended himself. Then he grinned. Did you expect a heart design after breaking my poor little heart? Bakugo rolled his eyes and saved himself from having to reply by taking a sip. His brow raised automatically. He usually wasn't one for sweet drinks, but again, Kirishima surprised him. The drink wasn't overly sugary, and if Bakugo had to exist during the chilly weather, the flavor wasn't an awful match to the cold and the changing leaves outside. It's not bad, shitty hair, he mumbled. Kirishima clapped his hands together. From you, I think that means it's great, he said confidently. Don't get ahead of yourself, Bakugo replied. Kirishima ignored him, smirking. Technically, since you gave me feedback, that means you're admitting I'm your cute local barista, huh? Bakugo's eyes widened. He barely restrained himself from crackling his palms at him. Don't you have work to be doing, or fanboy practice? He hissed. Kirishima laughed. Whatever, Blasty, you can't deny it, he chimed in as he retreated behind the register. Bakugo stared at him dumbfounded. Blasty? Shaking his head, he returned to his book and read uninterrupted until it was time for his shift. On the way out, Kirishima said his now usual goodbye to him. This time, Bakugo returned it with a small wave over his shoulder. Time passes. The next morning, Pinky was behind the register again. Morning, Takahashi-san, she yawned as he approached the counter. Where's shitty hair? He asked in lieu of a greeting. Pinky blinked at him for a second. You mean Kiri? She ventured, and he grunted an affirmation. It's his day off, she said slowly, head cocking slightly to the side as she looked him over. Bakugo wasn't sure what her expression meant, but he knew he didn't like it, whatever it was. Oh, he said lamely. Good. Pinky laughed, but seemed to decide to let it go. That'll be 300 yen for a cappuccino, she said. Bakugo responded, and Pinky's brows arched. Ignoring the heat rising to his cheeks, he looked pointedly at the spot on her forehead and continued, Give me a caramel latte instead. Pinky's brow knit together for a second, and then her eyes widened infinitesimally. She was quick to tame her expression, but Bakugo could swear there was a hint of a smirk that remained. A caramel latte, huh? How much? He spat, grinding his teeth as she punched in his order into the register. She chuckled and gave him a smile that looked far too innocent. 320 yen, and I'll bring it to your table. Thanks. Bakugo dropped his change unceremoniously onto the counter and stalked away. When Pinky placed his drink in front of him 5 minutes later, unlike Kirishima, she didn't say a word, simply setting it down and going back to her job. Bakugo looked at the mug. No little explosions, no latte art. But that was fine, he told himself. It's not like that would affect the taste. Except it kind of did. At least it seemed to. Because as he drank his latte, he couldn't help but think that it wasn't quite as good as the one from yesterday. Fine, good, but not great. And when he slipped out the door, there was no excited, bye Takahashi-san, waiting for him. As he made his way to his office, he couldn't help but feel a sense of lacking, like somehow his morning routine had been missing something, even though he'd repeated all the steps just like he did every day. He shook the feeling from his head and changed into his hero gear, readying himself for his patrol shift. Time passes. Fortunately, regardless of the cause of the odd mood Bakugo had found himself in at the beginning of his patrol, he'd quickly managed to shake it. He had dismissed the feeling as a fluke and gone about his day as normal, having a relatively productive shift, even if it did end with a mountain of paperwork before he was able to go home for the evening. By the time he was making his way to BeansPot again for his morning coffee the following day, he had completely forgotten that he'd ever felt off. That was until, however, he pushed open the door to see Pinky behind the counter again, and disappointment and annoyance flooded through him. Not that Pinky's coffee was bad. He'd been drinking it for years now. It was just Kirishima's was better, more satisfying in some subtle way he couldn't quite put his finger on. Maybe it was the latte art. He must have been scowling more than he realized because Pinky's expression told him she could sense his foul mood despite his face being half hidden by a sick mask. "He has the weekend off," she said with an unapologetic shrug. Bakugo ground his teeth. There was no way he was that predictable. "Whatever." "So," Pinky said, moving on, "caramel latte today or cappuccino?" He replied, thrusting 300 yen at her. "Yep, I'll bring that out to you." She took his money and he took his seat. He fished his paperback out of his bag, and by the time she brought his drink over, he'd done nothing but read the same sentence 5 times without absorbing any of it. With a sigh, he put his book away and began scrolling mindlessly on his phone as he sipped his coffee. He was almost done, lifting the cup to his lips for his last sip when the door burst open, jingling the bells tied above it so aggressively that Bakugo jumped and accidentally sent the rest of his drink flying. Luckily, none of it got on him, but he cursed under his breath as he quickly gathered napkins from the dispenser and mopped up his mess from the table. He was turning to glare at the offender when a familiar voice reached his ears. "Hey, Mina." Shitty hair. Of fucking course. Bakugo finished spinning around, and sure enough, there he was, standing on the customer side of the counter and grinning at his coworker like he didn't just almost give Bakugo a heart attack. Except something was different about him. Heat rose to Bakugo's cheeks as he looked over him more closely. On second thought, maybe a lot was different about him. Or at least, Bakugo could now see some features that he usually couldn't when Kirishima was behind the counter wearing an apron and decent fucking clothing. He and Pinky were chatting, and Bakugo wasn't paying attention. He was far too taken aback by the low ponytail that replaced his usual spikes and the workout tank top and leggings that hugged his legs and chest and left almost nothing to the imagination, by the tattoo on his back of his rather large bicep. Bakugo's brain did, however, helpfully tune back in at the word date. "Oh yeah," Kirishima was laughing, scratching the back of his neck sheepishly. "I came back early. Turns out you need more than a tender conversation and 2 dinner dates to know you'll survive a whole weekend of camping with someone." Bakugo bristled. Why did this fucker date so much? The hell happened to "I'm so committed to ground zero"? And did he seriously just say he went into the wilderness with practically a total stranger? Was he trying to die? And where the fuck were his sleeves? It was freezing out by Bakugo's standards. As if he could sense the sudden cloud of negativity coming from the corner table, Kirishima finally turned in his direction. "Oh, hey Takahashi-san, how's it going?" he asked in a cheerful tone, fixing him with that damn 1,000-watt smile. Somehow it was even more blinding when paired with his loose bangs falling over his eyes as he cocked his head with a question. Bakugo felt his palms heating. "Fine," he snapped. With that, he opened his book back up and pointedly ignored him, wiping his hands on his jeans. There was a brief moment of silence when Kirishima and Mina, Pinky, were talking again. Bakugo strained his ears, but they seemed to be purposefully talking too quietly for him to hear. He tried again. half-heartedly, to actually read his book. But he was even less able to focus now than before. A glance at his watch told him he still had a half an hour before his shift started. Part of him wanted to bolt anyway, just to get out of here, while another part of him just really fucking wanted to know why the fuck Kirishima was suddenly giggling at something Pinky said. He gripped the edges of his book harder. He didn't notice Kirishima walking up to him until the chair across from him was being pulled out and he was sitting down. Slowly, Bakugo lowered his book, but he didn't shut it. Mind if I sit here? Kirishima asked with a tentative grin. You already are, Bakugo said bluntly. Kirishima chuckled. How has your weekend been so far? Bakugo reluctantly closed his book and sat it on the table. I've got to work all weekend. Oh, really? Kirishima asked. What do you do? He sounded genuinely curious. Bakugo bit his lip for a second. Doesn't matter, he mumbled eventually. Ah, okay, Kirishima responded, sounding a bit put out at Bakugo's short and closed-off replies. I'll let you get back to the— Did you seriously go camping with a stranger? Bakugo blurted, cutting him off. He didn't want Kirishima to leave, but he was having trouble thinking of anything else. Kirishima looked surprised, but then chuckled. Yeah, I kinda did, he said, shaking his head. We had dinner a couple times, but still, recipe for disaster, right? More like recipe for murder, Bakugo scolded. You should be more careful. Kirishima barked a loud laugh. Sorry, Mom, he teased. Bakugo rolled his eyes. Just trying to prevent Ground Zero from becoming an early widow. Kirishima threw his head back in laughter. Bakugo was busy processing the words that had just come out of his mouth as a blush crept up his neck. Thankfully, if Kirishima noticed, he didn't say anything. I'm sure Ground Zero is doing his fair share of dating and having plenty of wild nights in the meantime as well, Kirishima said, fixing him with that damned sunshine smile again. Bakugo snorted as he thought back to the last night off he'd had, which he'd spent in sweatpants on his couch. He'd watched a nature documentary, ate some takeout food, and fell asleep before 10 p.m. And he couldn't even recall the last time he'd been on a date. I fucking doubt it, Bakugo said as he glanced down at his watch and saw it was about time for him to get going. Standing, he pulled his hoodie over his head. Underneath, he had on a long-sleeved t-shirt, and by the door hung his winter coat. Had he mentioned he hated the cold yet? Here, dumbass, he said, shoving the hoodie at Kirishima, whose brows raised so high Bakugo was a bit worried they'd shoot straight off his face. You're gonna fucking catch a cold, running around half naked like that, and I don't want to listen to your sniffy ass all next week. Kirishima said without moving, and Bakugo dropped the hoodie into his lap before he could change his mind. Fighting a blush, Bakugo added a quick, don't get any ideas, I want that back tomorrow, before he practically began running to the door, hastily putting on his scarf and his jacket and bolting. He barely caught Kirishima's delayed response of, thank you, Blasty. Bakugo bit his lower lip and shook his head at the dumb nickname. Shoving his hands deep into his pockets, he walked to work at record speed. He wasn't fucking smiling, thank you very much. Time passes. Good morning, Blasty. Bakugo rolled his eyes as he hung his coat by the door. Quit fucking calling me that, shitty hair, he said over his shoulder, removing his scarf. Kirishima laughed. Maybe if you quit calling me that and learn Mina's name too. It's not fucking like... Bakugo cut himself off as he turned on and actually looked at Kirishima. He was wearing Bakugo's hoodie underneath of his apron. Kirishima raised a brow. You all right, man? Bakugo felt the tips of his ears going. I told you I wanted that back today, he mumbled, pointing at Kirishima's chest. Oh, Kirishima said, looking down. No problem. I was just a bit cold this morning. Let me take it off real quick, and then I'll get your drink. Bakugo grunted as Kirishima removed his apron and started to pull off his hoodie. Except as he stretched it over his head, his shirt was going along with it, exposing his stupidly toned Adonis belt and a trail of dark hair leading below the waistline of his jeans. Kirishima felt his entire face flush. Holy shit, it's fine, shitty hair, he growled. Huh? Kirishima hummed, still inside the sweatshirt. Put that shit back on and quit flashing your customers. Bakugo hissed. Just give it to me tomorrow. Oh, okay, Kirishima said, pulling the hoodie back down along with his shirt. Whatever you say, Blasty. He replaced his apron and went back to the register. Want a caramel latte today? He asked then, his grin just a tad too knowing. Narrowing his eyes, Bakugo grunted and threw 320 yen across the counter and made his way to his seat. Cheeks were still burning hot. He determinedly refused to look at shitty hair while he made his coffee, but he wasn't quite as successful when he delivered it to his table. He did manage to avoid eye contact, but when Kirishima sat down his drink, the sleeve of Bakugo's oversized hoodie slipped down over his hand as he pulled it away. Bakugo's eyes were immediately drawn to the way his fingers curled around the edge of the fabric, looking so small compared to the large fit. He didn't realize he was burning holes in the knees of his pants with his sparking palms until the smell of smoke reached his nose. Luckily for him, Kirishima had already strolled away, humming a song under his breath like he'd done absolutely nothing wrong. Bakugo cursed under his breath and patted his ruined pants. He sipped his coffee in silence, hardly tasting it as he willed his stupid fucking cheeks to get their shit together and calm the fuck down. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining me for this first chapter. I absolutely love this fic, and I hope you loved it as well. And I hope that you'll come back for the next piece. All right, and I'll see you guys next time.